Alright, in this video we're talking about the array weave. Now, from the assignment, there is a link, the array weave drawing that you can jump into so that you can see how to create that array weave. Okay, but this is set up so that you take a look at this object and you start to see the relationship between the repetitious nature of the part. Okay, so when you take a look at this, the hint here, find the pattern that used a rectangular array. Well, there's a pattern of repetition. Okay, finding that pattern of repetition is the key to this drawing. So I'm going to jump into my CAD file where I created the steps to do this. Okay, and we'll go through these steps. And you can see here, this is the pattern that has been blown apart, and it's in an active array. If I were to take and highlight one square of that pattern, you need to see that this pattern breaks on a line. And this is where I want you to start to see things, not like you're drawing with a pencil, but what you're drawing with a pattern, right? So, one of the first things that you need to do is you need to recognize from the given information in the drawing. Okay, we're going to go jump into this drawing and look. From the given information here, we need to figure out how to build the pattern. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. And it says that the whole thing is 6 by 6. Okay, so we could make one big 6 by 6 rectangle. So we could do that. Or we can start with the base pieces here. So let's start with the base pieces first. We'll build that 6 by 6 in a second. But let's start with this. So here we have 0.125. So I know that one of these lines to this line is 0.125. The next spacing is 0.125 also. So every single one of these lines I can assume is 0.125 away from each other. There's a dimension over here that says the square in the middle is 0.25. So now I know that I'm working with pretty much all standard size dimensions, okay, of 0.125 or 0.25. Here it's telling me that the spacing from the edge of the rectangle over to the first line is 0.125. So I can assume from this point to this point is 0.125. Then it's given 0.125. This spacing is 0.25, and then so forth and so on. Okay, so I can know what all the spacing is. So if I jump back here into my CAD file, one of the first things I'm going to have you do is draw a line that is 0.75 long. Because if we go back here and we start adding up this stuff, so we got 0.125 plus 0.125 plus 0.25 plus 0.1, see where this is coming to add up to be 0.75. If I were to look at this object, the distance from, I'll just go ahead and put a dimension on it, from here to here is 0.75. So that's where that line comes from. Okay, so we go ahead and we draw a line at 0.75. So I'll just do this right above where I have it drawn out, just so we can see that there's no fanciness going on. And I'll get this on the right layer. And we haven't really talked about layers in here yet, but we will shortly. All right, so we're on the right layer. So we got a 0.75. Now, number 2, offset the line up by 0.25. So you should know how to use the offset tool. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this, and I'm going to just keep going along. I'll copy this over to here, just so I'm working above every step. And I'll use the offset tool. And now it says specify offset distance in my command line. So I'm going to type in 0.125, enter. I'm going to select that object, move up, click. And that there is step number 2. Now, let's jump over here to 3. I'm going to go ahead, hit escape, finish that command, and I'm just going to keep copying this on down the line, sort of like an assembly line for me. And then I'm going to look at offset the top line up 0.25. Now we're going up 0.25, and the whole reason we're going up 0.25 is because of this spacing right here. Okay, so now we're working on that piece. So we're going to come back up to here. We'll do that. We're going to do offset tool, specify offset distance, 0.25, enter. Grab the line, come up and drop it. There's the offset of the 0.25. The next step, 4. I'm just going to, again, copy mine over, keep things rolling down the line, and we're going to up by 0.125 again, so offset, specify offset distance, 0.125, enter. Grab the top line, move up top, click. All right, hit escape, finish the command. On to step 5. I'm going to go ahead and highlight my stuff. I'm going to copy it over just to keep making an assembly line of what we're doing. And now what I need to do is I need to start setting up my first vertical line here. Now, the distance is coming from the end of the line over by 0.25, and all that is coming from the drawing, and at the top of the drawing it's saying up here 0.125 from the corner over. Okay, so that's the spacing for this entire vertical line, okay? And then we start drawing the same piece of information in length, which is going to be that 0.75. So let's jump back over here. And the way that I would recommend doing this, okay, is coming over and then coming up, all right? Or we could go ahead and draw a line and move it into position. There's a few ways to do this, okay? So let's go ahead. I'm going to grab my line tool, and I'm going to do this all with lines to keep it as clean and understandable as possible, all right? I'm going to first come up by 0.125, enter. And I'm going to come over by 0.125, enter. Now, the reason why I did these two lines, okay, I drew these two lines as construction points because I needed to then create a 0.75 line straight down across these parts, okay? That spaces this line over from the end by 0.125, and it spaces the start point up by 0.125. By doing that, it positions it properly. Now, these lines I just used, I don't need these anymore. I can highlight these and just delete them. And now I have the geometry in the proper location. Now, on to 6, we are right back into that same situation. We are going to start using that offset tool again like crazy. So here, we're going to offset the vertical line to the right, 0.125. So grab the offset tool, type in 0.125, enter. Grab my line, move it to the proper direction, click, enter. Now we're going to do the same thing again. Offset last line, 0.25. So we'll highlight this. We're going to do a copy, put it over here. And now offset tool, specify offset distance, 0.25, enter. Grab my line and move it to the correct area, click, and it drops that 0.25 over. And then you can probably just go ahead and guess. The last thing and the next thing, without even looking at directions, is going to be offset by 0.125 again. So we'll grab that offset tool, 0.125, enter, grab the line, and drop it there. Now, this is where we get to the point where we're going to just start doing some trimmity trims because we need to trim up what we have. All right? Now we are going to trim. Now, this trim is very similar to some of the last assignments we've done, like cross boxes, rectangle boxes, where we want to look at the drawing that we want to make and then get rid of what we don't need. So I'm going to grab my trim tool, and I'm just going to look and mouse over the stuff I don't want. Well, here I don't need these two lines down here, so I'm going to click on this one and this one. And then here I don't need this one or this one. I come down here, and we're going to click on this one and this one. And then here, I don't need these. I'll do a little window across those, and they're gone. So this is now the weave that we will use to repeat. I'll finish my trim tool, hit escape, and now this is what we will use to create the repeat. Okay? All right, so 10, the object above is the array object. Well, that's it right here. We're not going to copy it to there. We need a 6x6 box now so we can fill in some stuff. So I'm just going to say, let's grab my rectangle tool, click and pull, 6, tab 6, enter. There is my box. And then I'm just going to go ahead and position this thing that I just built up here in the right place. Well, how do we do that? Well, if I highlight it and grab my move tool, where I really want to grab this thing is right here in this corner. But I don't have any geometry there to grab it by the corner. So I could go ahead and draw some lines, okay? Or what I can do is what you're watching me do right now on my screen. AutoCAD will actually give you a corner point to grab this thing by, okay? I'm going to do this again so you can see this because this is really important. You could very simply, and I'll do this in a different color, you could very simply draw one line over, Then you can draw a line down and use that point right there where you highlight everything, grab the move tool, and then move it from here to here. That works. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Okay, you got to go in and delete these little purple lines, and that's the part that gets to be a pain. All right, or just do some undos. The other thing you can do, and this is really neat to see in AutoCAD, AutoCAD recognizes that things really do exist by corners and things like that. And sometimes you don't want to have to draw those lines. So if I highlight this, grab my move tool, zoom in, and I just sit over top of the endpoint. Once it says endpoint and I start moving away from it, I get my displacement to pop up. Then I'm going to move to another endpoint. And it remembers the last thing I did. I'm moving over, whoop, and it finds the intersection point for those two lines. So I'm going to left click, and then I come down to the endpoint and left click again. So that is just another tool to position parts without having to have geometry set. So at this point, we are ready to array our drawing. Now, in the directions it says, click on the array tool, select the weave object only. So let's just do these together slow. Click on the array tool. Well, that's coming off of this ribbon bar, rectangular array right there. Bam, I did it. Step 1. Now, select the weave object only. Well, that would be this thing right here. So how do I select? Do I go in and click on each one of these little? No, that is way too difficult. I'm just going to click and hold. Well, click, not click and hold, but just click, come across this with a panning window. Notice I used a blue window, not a green window. If I did a green window, I'd have to be a little more careful. But this way I can come across that box too and not get my 6x6. All right? So I got that selected. It says on the top ribbon bar, input 0.75 for row spacing between and points. Okay, so let's go back up here. Hit escape. Let me do this. So I'm going to do array tool, highlight, enter, and that. All right, so while we are in this array tool, we are going to come up here to column, between, rows, between, and the information I'm going to put here is the between. The between is actually from this point to the next point of the next object. Okay, so I want the distance from this corner point to this corner point to be 0.75. So I'm going to type in 0.75, and then I'll click in a different cell. Okay, and notice they jump. Then I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to put in my between as 0.75, and click in a different cell, and they jump into position. So right now we got the spacing between 0.75 and 0.75, okay? And it's important to recognize that that spacing is based upon the distance from this corner to where the next object gets put, okay? So it's from the corner to where the next object gets spaced by column and row. It just means they're jammed up next to each other at 0.75 in each direction. Now, we need to fill the box. So let's just do this slowly. Let's just say we're going to take the columns and we're going to make them 6. And if you click in any one of these other cells, it will show you what you just did. So at 6, we're like, we need a little more. So if I highlight this and say 7 and click in a different cell, still need a little more. Let's go for 8. And click in a different cell. There it is. It fills it in nice and neat. Now let's go in the other direction. So rows, I'm going to just go right for the full 8 and drop it in, and there you go. So you can see that 8 and 8, 0.75 breaks this out so that the array is now pushed through your 6x6. At this point, we can say we are done the array. We can hit close array, and it's now closed. We now can take and move this thing around to wherever we want to put it. We could start the dimensioning process, just as we had dimensioned everything else so far. So just place these dimensions on here. If you want to put the hint, you can. It's not necessary. What I'm looking for is that you have created the object and that you have dimensioned it so that it is easy to recognize that this is a 6 and that this is a 6. And then if you dimension one of these weaves, we'll get to see that this is a 0.15 .125, and that this is a .125, and that maybe you just grab something from here to here saying that this is .25. Anything to this effect will work out as far as dimensioning for this point. Again, we haven't spoke about dimensioning and the specifics of dimensioning, so any of this will work. Try to keep your dimensions as neat and clean and uniform as possible, not running over top of things, and then this will work. So hopefully this helps you guys get through this array weave with as little hair loss as possible.